Tonight, Kamala Harris promises to be president for all Americans as she accepts the Democratic nomination. Hello, I'm Candice Prosser, live from Adelaide. This is ABC News. Hundreds of CFMEU officials out of work as the union is placed into administration. The state government boosts funding for Food Bank to help meet rising demand. And a life lesson for Crow's young gun Josh Rochelle, accepting his shock axing. US Vice President Kamala Harris has formally accepted her party's nomination to run for the nation's top job. An adoring crowd of supporters mostly applauded her keynote address, but divisions within the Democratic ranks still flickered through on the fourth and final day of the convention.
From supporting star to the lead role.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
An extraordinary moment for the daughter of immigrants, thanking her late mother for her self-belief.
She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it.
She emphasised her years as a prosecutor.
My entire career, I've only had one client, the people.
And she prosecuted the case against her Republican rival.
The consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
The war in Gaza remains a division point. Protests have continued throughout the week, with the party refusing to add a Palestinian-American speaker to the stage.
We feel that our party is betraying our values with this decision.
Harris defending the current policy, but striking a slightly different tone.
President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends.
She also promised progressive reforms like enshrining abortion and voting rights.
What about us?
This night had another star-studded lineup, the famous side-by-side with Harris's family.
And what are you here to do?
To teach you how to say your auntie's name.
Kamala!
Donald Trump held his own campaign event at the southern border, but was watching events in Chicago closely.
Why didn't she do the things that she's complaining about? She could have done it 3.5 years ago. She could do it tonight.
It's hard to exaggerate just how much Kamala Harris's ascent to the top of the party ticket has completely reshaped this race. The Vice President is still claiming the underdog tag, but within this room there is an overwhelming sense of optimism that they can win this race. The polls are tight, but they believe they have the momentum and they believe America is ready to elect its first female president.
She's gonna just go all the way. They won't know what to do.
Democrats have embraced a common direction.
We are not going back.
Now Harris has 11 weeks to convince the country to come with her. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Chicago.
All branches of the CFMEU's construction division have been formally placed into administration over allegations of corruption and infiltration by organised crime. The union had resisted the appointment of an external administrator, but earlier this week the federal parliament passed laws giving the government the power to step in. With an administrator now in place, hundreds of officials have had their roles terminated, most of them volunteer positions. But the National Secretary, Zack Smith, remains in his job. The federal government moved ahead of a possible court challenge to the legislation.
There's no place for corruption or intimidation in the building industry from unions. There's no place for corruption, and to have a corrupt union official, you need a corrupt employer to be paying their money, and there's no place for it.
Australia will, for the first time, take command of an international maritime effort to protect shipping routes in the Red Sea, but won't deploy any additional military assets. A month after the ABC first revealed the mission, the Albanese government is facing criticism for still not providing a warship. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
A glimpse of the Australian Army's future lethal hardware. High-tech South Korean-designed vehicles will soon be built at a new facility in the Defence Minister's own Victorian electorate. Richard Marles on hand for the opening of the military factory before officially confirming the ADF's next overseas mission.
An Australian will be taking command of the Combined Task Force 153. This is a very significant step.
From October, a Navy captain and a small number of other Australian personnel already stationed in the Middle East will take charge of an International Maritime Task Force. CTF 153 is dedicated to protecting shipping routes in the Red Sea from Houthi rebel attacks. But as the ABC revealed last month, the new deployment won't include an Australian warship.
It should be more, and if we had a competent government in place, it would be more, because it's important to stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies.
We need to be focused on our region. I mean, that is in terms of the assets that we deploy.
It's not ideal for us to send a command team across but not to send a ship. However, we know that the Royal Australian Navy does not have enough surface combatants.
This week, the threats posed to international trade through the Red Sea highlighted by an attack on a Greek vessel. And the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier has now arrived in the Middle East amid concerns of a growing conflict.
We know that tensions are high. We want to see a de-escalation of tensions in the region.
Australia's command role in the Middle East will last just 6 months, and privately, American officials are disappointed that this country's still declining to send a warship to the region. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
An expert panel has called for tougher regulation of alcohol and gambling to help prevent violence against women. The review was sparked by an urgent National Cabinet meeting earlier this year after a spike in the number of women killed. Among the recommendations, the panel called for steps towards a total ban on gambling ads, something crossbenchers are pushing for in Canberra. And the panel has recommended curbing alcohol sales and delivery, plus more money for crisis accommodation. There's a warning the state government's proposed move to ban political donations threatens to stifle competition. Policy think tank the Australia Institute argues the draft legislation puts up barriers for would-be politicians to raising money while significantly increasing taxpayer funding to political parties, most of which would go to the major parties. Special Minister of State Dan Cregan argues the bill has been deliberately designed to ensure new entrants to the political process are not disadvantaged. But the Institute says the plan needs to be tested in a parliamentary inquiry.
The aggregate effect of the proposed changes seems likely to increase the power of major parties and incumbents at the expense of new entrants. That's a problem because we want a level playing field in elections where anyone is able to contest power and win votes.
One of the state's major food charities is moving to establish its food hubs with other community services. Foodbank SA has opened a new hub in the Adelaide suburb of St Mary's that sits alongside an op shop, community garden and kitchen and a men's shed. The move comes as the relief charity deals with a 35% increase in demand in the past financial year. It says people are feeling the cost of living crisis, and co-locating with other services offers further help to those in need.
We see this model as being something that we want to roll out more and more around South Australia in the coming few years.
Experts are calling for a complete redesign of button batteries, following new research showing they're leading to serious injuries and deaths in kids worldwide. Advocates say recent product safety reforms don't go far enough, and they want major manufacturers to take action.
The button batteries in Evie's hearing aids are a constant temptation.
No, we're not popping one out, darling. Can I have it? Can I have it, darling?
The 14-year-old, who has an intellectual disability, was recently hospitalised after putting one in her ear.
That was pretty scary, and it's happened again since then. By the time I saw it, there was sort of lots of black discharge.
A new study has looked into the cases of more than 400 children across the world who suffered button battery injuries.
Button batteries are dangerous because they form a current which releases hydroxide ions, and those hydroxide ions are extremely alkaline and corrosive.
The leading injury was a hole or damage to the esophagus, followed by burning through to the windpipe and aorta. 35 children died, including 3 in Australia.
It can make holes in the intestines, which can also be potentially fatal.
Injuries from inserting the batteries included a hole in the nose.
Worldwide, button battery injuries are rising. In Australia, about 20 kids a week end up in emergency departments. Advocates say recent reforms like childproof packaging don't address the core issue. The products remain unsafe.
We started seeing kids ingesting button batteries in the late 70s, and the button battery companies have known about it since then.
There needs to be mandatory legislation that force manufacturers into changing button batteries.
Major manufacturer Energizer says it's introduced a bitter coating and blue dye and continues to research how to improve safety. Michael Atkin, ABC News.
Protesters in Jakarta have forced the president into a major backflip with the biggest demonstrations Indonesia has seen for years. President Joko Widodo was trying to get around a court ruling that would have paved the way for his youngest son to run for a political seat. But the proposed changes to election laws sparked widespread calls of nepotism.
Late into the evening outside Indonesia's parliament, police and protesters were still sparring after a remarkable outpouring of anger across the country. Tens of thousands of protesters turned out in major cities, accusing the president and his allies of trying to rewrite election rules to favour his son.
We'll keep fighting and we'll get many more people to join us. This is only the beginning of how we fight against attacks on democracy in Indonesia.
President Joko Widodo last year managed to secure his oldest son a loophole to run for vice president, despite being below a minimum age limit. Now it appears he's trying again with a petition to allow his other son, 29-year-old Kaesang Pangarap, to run in regional elections. But the court this week ruled the minimum age rule of 30 must remain in place, prompting parliamentary allies of Mr Widodo to try to rewrite election rules and defy the court.
The mess will continue until Joko Widodo is out from Indonesian politics for good.
And with anger mounting, the president's allies announced they were cancelling their efforts to revise the laws.
After a decade as president and with just a few weeks to go, this really is a blow for Joko Widodo. Having secured the vice presidency for his oldest son, it appeared he was well on the way to creating a family dynasty to continue his influence after his term ends in October.
The backdown has largely calmed the mood in the Indonesian capital, at least for now. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Jakarta.
The body of British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch has been recovered from the wreckage of a super yacht that sank off the coast of Italy. 6 bodies have now been brought to shore after the vessel capsized during a freak storm near Sicily. The search is continuing for Mr Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah. A judicial investigation is underway into the disaster, with some experts claiming the luxury vessel should have been strong enough to weather the storm. Negotiators are arriving in Cairo for the next round of ceasefire talks, with the issue of the Egypt-Gaza border expected to be top of the agenda. Israel is demanding its troops remain in control of the corridor separating Gaza and Egypt, rejecting the proposal to station international troops there instead. Hamas, which will not be at the Cairo talks, says it won't accept a deal that allows Israeli forces to stay in Gaza. The US envoy to the United Nations Nations called on the Security Council to press Hamas to accept a bridging proposal by Israel, while the Palestinian observer urged the UN to do more to help stop the fighting in Gaza.
You have the tools to act. You have the resolutions to act. Please act. Deal or no deal. There is no excuse for the Israelis' continued killing of innocent Palestinian civilians.
Kyiv says it's used a high-precision US-made bomb to attack a Russian military post in the region of Kursk, where Ukraine has launched an incursion. Ukraine's Air Force released footage of the airstrike on a Russian platoon command base using an American GBU-39 bomb. The two-week-long operation into the Kursk region has given a major morale boost to the Ukrainian military after months of Russia making slow but steady gains in the east. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the incursion into Russia's territory is part of its effort to end the 30-month-old war under the terms of an independent Ukraine. Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, more commonly known as POTS, is a disorder which affects thousands of Australians. Researchers say it's poorly recognised and has been linked to viruses like COVID-19, with some sufferers struggling with symptoms for months before being successfully diagnosed.
Tess Hansen looks like a healthy teenager, but spends most days battling dizziness, fatigue and muscle pain, the result of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS. Her POTS diagnosis took more than 18 months.
A very dark time, it was a desperate time.
POTS researcher Dr. Dennis Lau says Miss Hansen's not alone.
This is still a condition that is poorly recognised in the medical field, and lots of patients continue to present to our emergency departments and been told that there's nothing wrong with them.
Tess has missed more than 200 days of school.
My social life has very much gone downhill. I don't really see many people anymore other than school.
While almost 80% of long COVID patients meet the criteria for POTS, there is only one patient registry in the whole Southern Hemisphere, and that's located here in South Australia. The first public POTS clinic opened just 5 months ago, and it already has a 15-month waiting list. The poorly recognised condition has been linked to viral infections like COVID-19. That has epidemiologists worried.
If there's been 1 million people infected, that means we have about 35,000 people with long COVID in South Australia, at least that many. And if we're getting 80% of those having some conditions which impact on their autonomous nervous system, like POTS, that's an awful lot of cases.
Tess hopes more people can be made aware of POTS.
This past year, we've progressed a lot with what we've discovered and stuff like that, so that's been very helpful.
Progress on a long road to recovery. Julie Kimberley, ABC News, Renmark.
To finance now, the share market had a bit of a stumble, while ANZ has been hit with a $250 million penalty by Australia's financial regulator. Here's David Chow.
Well, after rising for 10 days in a row, the All Ords finally fell today, but only by a tiny fraction. But it's done pretty well lately, having jumped 5% from its low point a few weeks ago. But overall, it's still down more than 1% from the record high it touched just before that huge sell-off at the start of the month. Meanwhile, today's worst performer was Ingham's, which played chicken and lost. Its share price plunged despite its profit jumping 68%, which, it seems, wasn't good enough. But Main Pharma shares surged despite its $169 million loss, which wasn't as bad as last year's. And ANZ did poorly after the financial regulator APRA ordered the bank to keep an extra $250 million in reserves. So that's money just sitting there doing almost nothing, which is a bank's worst nightmare. All this while another regulator, ASIC, investigates the bank for market manipulation in relation to its bond trading. Now, this is really hurting ANZ as it's fallen behind the other banks on a total returns basis, which tracks the increase in its share price and dividends. Now, overseas, Wall Street fell quite a bit, but it was a mixed bag for Asian markets. Oil prices rose sharply, while gold, iron ore and copper fell. And the Aussie dollar is buying 67.2 US cents. And finally, Tesla is no longer the top-selling EV brand in Europe. That honour now goes to BMW. And it just so happens the Tesla brand is turning toxic, according to consumer surveys, which could be a CEO problem. And that's finance.
Young Crows star Josh Rochelli says he accepts his shock axing for the underperforming club's final game of the AFL season. Coach Matthew Nicks says he fully supports the forward, but has been working for some time to get him to meet team standards.
While the Crows were getting ready to fly out to Sydney, Josh Rochelli was training with the SANFL side. His axing from the team followed his goading of Port supporters in the showdown, supposedly the last straw for Matthew Nicks.
It's not an isolated incident. This is not one scenario. This is something we've worked on for a period of time now. Such a fine line between what we accept and what we don't as a football club.
After the club was widely criticised by supporters, the man in the spotlight was publicly at least accepting of his fate.
Yeah, obviously I'm disappointed with how last week turned out. I'm very remorseful for what happened, but my job now is to help the SANFL team go out this weekend and hopefully have a finals campaign.
Nick says he backs Rochelli's on-field exuberance and this is a temporary blip on his career.
The last week and a half has been a tough week for him and I've been there for him and I will be there for him going forward. He's a high-profile player. I've got no doubt he'll be a leader of our footy club in the near future.
The 21-year-old, quick to stress his axing won't prompt him looking to exit his long-term contract.
I absolutely love the club. I love my teammates. And yeah, my future here is to be at the Adelaide Crows.
At Alberton, Dan Houston was training despite his season ending last night when he failed to overturn a 5-match ban. The club has no choice but to move on and will be playing to beat Fremantle in Perth on Sunday, regardless of whether a potential Giants loss to the Western Bulldogs means a top 2 finish is guaranteed.
We'll prepare like we have every other week for this game to be to make sure we bring our best and play our best available people to hopefully stay in really good form.
However, the Power will take all 3 emergencies for the game, just in case they make late changes. Matthew Smith, ABC News.
As the afterglow of the Paris Olympics fades, many of Australia's leading athletes are facing the harsh realities of the aftermath. Australia's most successful games in history yielded 18 gold medals, but the athletes are now dealing with financial, emotional and mental challenges.
Matt Wern was the first man to defend a dinghy-class gold medal in Paris. It earned him the honour of carrying the Australian flag at the closing ceremony, but the spotlight is already fading.
Once all the media and everything dies down, we'll just sort of be going back to, your sailor that sails out of Perth, and there won't be much involved and it becomes hard to find sponsors.
Pride and I'm so proud of myself, I'm so proud of us, but I'm so disappointed and I feel so embarrassed.
Georgie Parker was part of the Hockeyroos team that was knocked out in the quarterfinals in Rio 2016.
It's a really sad time and you're embarrassed and you're anxious and you're sad and you're angry and you're feeling all these emotions that you feel that you're not allowed to give.
Parker's now in the process of having her Olympic rings tattoo removed.
Every time I looked at it, I was reminded of something that I didn't achieve.
She says it's important to remember not every athlete has a picture-perfect Olympics.
So I think it's that sudden shift of being 100 miles an hour to suddenly no one caring about you again is what's the hardest bit.
In my head, I'm I gave it everything I have and it still wasn't enough. But what is enough? I guess that's the thing that I'm trying to come to terms with now.
For some, the answer may have to wait another 4 years. Amanda Shalala, ABC News.
Australian cyclist Ben O'Connor has taken a commanding lead in Spain's La Vuelta after powering to victory on stage 6. He dominated the 185-kilometre section, breaking away on the penultimate climb to seize the race leader's red jersey from three-time champion Primož Roglič. The 28-year-old from Perth now leads by almost 5 minutes in the general classification. The victory has also seen him join the prestigious list of riders with stage wins on all 3 of cycling's Grand Tours.
I just laid it all out there, and I felt like I could win this stage from the start. So yeah, it's pretty special when you can just go out and crush it like that. I absolutely loved every moment.
The connection between humans and dogs goes back tens of thousands of years. That connection is being harnessed by Canberra charity Integra Service Dogs. The organisation pairs Labradors with military veterans who are living with mental and physical injuries.
Toy, how about we just do it over here? Come on.
2-year-old Capri is being picked up for work from her foster family. Capri is one of around a dozen Labradors currently in training with Integra Service Dogs.
Today we'll be working on a lot of our contact skills, just that really nice contact that can ground a handler and really calm them if they're becoming elevated.
Labradors not suited to being guide dogs come here for a career change, learning to see and smell mental health symptoms like anxiety, hyper-awareness and flashbacks.
A lot of things that you and I take for granted in everyday life. So just building the confidence to go outside in a busy public space, to build new skills in communication and loyalty and trust.
Integra started in 2015 when co-founder Ben Johnson realised the power of a well-trained lab.
To actually give someone a new sense of purpose and focus and skills, and critically to keep that individual alive at that point in time, to give them a sense of motivation and routine and reward.
It's now the largest service dog charity in the country, matching a dog's strengths and personality with the handler's needs.
Come on, get dressed.
Australian Army veteran Chris Hodder lives with PTSD. His dog Bella has been trained to recognise his symptoms.
PTSD can make you very aggressive, very uneasy, and they bring back the ease. And Bella has changed my life for the better, because where I was apprehensive, where I had anxiety and was always on edge, she's taken that away.
Bella was paired with Chris 3 years ago.
And she just sat straight down next to my feet. So it was sort of like an instant bond. And that night, it was funny because I had a horrendous nightmare that night, and she woke me up. She actually nosed me on the face and as if to say, "Are you okay?"
And they've been inseparable ever since.
She's not a pet, she's my mate. She's my confidant. She's the one that keeps me on track.
A man and his dog in emotional lockstep. James Fiver, ABC News, Canberra.
To the weather details now, and first a look at tonight's photo of morning mist in Mount Barker, sent to us by Hans Hoekman. It was warm and cloudy in Adelaide today, reaching a top of 25.2 degrees in the city just before 3 o'clock this afternoon, after a low of 11.3. It was unseasonably warm right across the state, with Oodnadatta recording South Australia's hottest winter day on record at 38.5 degrees. Patchy cloud brought isolated showers to the agricultural districts, with Mount Gambier reaching a top of 17. A low and front will bring rain and gusty winds to the south of our state and showers to Tasmania, Victoria and southern New South Wales. An approaching front will also bring showers and storms to southwest Western Australia, while a high will direct dry northerly winds over the interior. It will be fine and 26 degrees for Brisbane tomorrow, 26 with rain for Sydney, 19 degrees and rain for Perth, and a sunny 35 degrees in the Alice. Closer to home, above average temperatures will continue, with showers developing about the Flinders and Southern Pastoral District, 35 degrees expected for Cooper Pedy. Further south, possible morning showers will clear for a mostly dry day, a top of 23 degrees for Clare and 21 for Coonawarra. There is a strong wind warning for the lower southeast coast. A sunny day for Adelaide tomorrow, with a slight chance of a shower in the evening, a top of 23 degrees for the city after an overnight low of 12. On the waters, northwesterly winds tending northeasterly to 15 knots and seas around 1 metre. The sun will rise at 6:45 and set just after 10 to 6. After a sunny start, it will be a wet week ahead. 20 degrees and showers on Sunday, a wintry 17 on Wednesday, and 20 degrees with showers by this time next week. That is the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thank you for your company this evening. Good night.